I had just returned from a 9-month deployment and had not even taken off my boots when my mother-in-law dragged 2 suitcases into my house and said, "We'll be staying here for a while." Then she handed me a list of house rules, including one that said I would do their laundry and ironing. I simply smiled, but what happened at exactly 5 the next morning? At exactly 5 the next morning, I put the whistle to my lips and blew. The sound cut through the dark house like a blade. Something hit the floor in the living room. Evelyn cried out from the guest room. A second later, Brooke shouted from upstairs, asking if the house was on fire. Then came the rush of footsteps moving toward the kitchen. I was already dressed for a run. My hair was pulled back. A cup of black coffee sat warm in my hand. Beside me, a whiteboard hung where Evelyn could not possibly miss it. 5 a.m., wake up. 5:20 a.m., room inspection. 5:45 a.m., cleaning assignments. 6:30 a.m., breakfast. Evelyn appeared first, wrapped in a robe, her hair pressed flat on one side. Brooke followed with a blanket around her shoulders and the stunned look of someone dragged out of sleep by an emergency. "What in the world are you doing?" Evelyn asked. I took a slow sip of coffee. "I thought you appreciated structure." Her eyes moved past me to the board. Then they dropped to the folded paper on the counter. Her paper. The list of house rules she had handed me less than 12 hours earlier. That was the moment her anger changed. It was still there, but now it carried something else. Recognition. She understood that I had taken the idea she meant to use against me and turned it around. What she did not understand yet was that the whistle was only the beginning. To understand why I was standing in my kitchen with an army whistle before sunrise, you have to go back 11 hours, to the moment I came home and realized somebody else had already decided what home was supposed to mean for me. The trip back had been long in the way. Military travel is always long. Too much waiting, too many instructions, too many hours sitting under fluorescent lights while somebody checked another list. By the time I left the base, the smell of metal, fuel, and dry dust had settled into my clothes. It followed me into the car and stayed with me during the drive through Colorado Springs. Families crowded the arrival area behind me. Children ran toward parents they had not seen in months. Spouses held each other in the walkway, not caring who had to move around them. There were tears, laughter, balloons, and handmade signs. Ryan was not there. He was finishing a construction project in Alaska and was not expected home for another 2 weeks. I understood. His work mattered too, and we had already agreed that neither of us would turn the timing into a test of love. Honestly, part of me was relieved to be going home alone. I did not want a celebration. I did not want questions. I did not want anyone asking how it felt to be back before I had figured that out for myself. People often assume that the hardest part of coming home is carrying memories from wherever you were sent. Sometimes that is true, but nobody talks much about the small things. Nobody announced when dinner would be served. There was no radio near my shoulder. I did not need permission to use a vehicle. I could shower whenever I wanted. I could sleep. I could sit in a quiet room and let an hour pass without explaining how I had used it. The freedom felt good. It also felt strange. For 9 months, every hour of my day belonged to a mission. I had been home less than 1 hour, and all I wanted was to remember what it felt like for 1 hour to belong only to me. I drove through my neighborhood with the windows cracked. The late summer air smelled like cut grass and warm pavement. The houses looked exactly as they had in the photographs Ryan sent me. Neat lawns, closed garage doors, porch lights waiting for dusk. When I pulled into my driveway, I stayed in the car for a moment. The house was still. That was all I wanted from it. Stillness. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The familiar smell of wood, laundry soap, and the cedar candle near the stairs met me in the hallway. I set my keys in the blue ceramic bowl by the door. Then I lowered my duffel bag to the floor. My shoulders ached. My boots felt heavier than they had that morning. Upstairs, my own bed waited. So did a hot shower and 14 days of leave that, for a few seconds, still felt like they belonged to me. Then the doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass, I saw two figures standing on the porch, and beside them, two large suitcases. I had been home for 40 minutes. I should have let the doorbell ring. Instead, I opened the door and gave them the chance to show me exactly who they were. I opened the door. Evelyn stood on the porch in cream slacks, a blue blouse, and low heels better suited for a church luncheon than a long drive. Behind her, Brooke stared at her phone as if arriving unannounced required no explanation. There were two suitcases beside them. One had a bright new luggage tag. The other was so large that Brooke had to pull it with both hands when it caught on the porch. Evelyn smiled. Ryan said we could stay until Brooke gets back on her feet. I noticed the wording. Ryan said, not Ryan asked you. Evelyn was not checking whether the arrangement worked for me. She was presenting it as something already settled. Brooke had recently gone through a divorce. Ryan had mentioned that she was struggling, but he had not shared many details. Most of our calls had been short, and harder conversations were always saved for later. I told myself 1 week would not hurt anything. Maybe Ryan had sent a message while I was in the air. Maybe he thought I already knew. I did not want my first evening home to become a family argument on the front porch. Whatever else I thought of Brooke, I knew what it meant to lose the shape of a life you had counted on. So I stepped aside. Compassion is a good instinct, but compassion without a boundary is an invitation some people will rewrite as permission. Evelyn crossed the threshold first. She pointed upstairs and told Brooke the guest room would give her more closet space. Brooke said she would need the whole closet. Neither waited for my answer. A small storage box appeared beside my office door. Evelyn asked for the Wi-Fi password before asking how my trip had been. Brooke looked toward the garage and said it would be perfect for a few things she still needed to bring over. A few things. She said it casually, but the suitcases already looked like a beginning, not an emergency. None of those moments meant much alone. A closet, a box, a comment about the garage, but they came one after another, too smooth and too practiced. I had spent too many years studying preparation not to notice when people had planned ahead. The suitcases had barely cleared the hallway when Evelyn reached into her purse. I wrote down a few things so we can avoid confusion, she said. Her voice was gentle, almost helpful. She handed me a folded sheet of paper. The first lines looked ordinary enough. Breakfast together at 6:30 a.m., dinner as a family whenever possible. The living room should be kept presentable. Then the tone changed. The office door was to remain open so Evelyn could use it for private calls. The living room would be available for women from church. The garage would be reserved for Brooke's belongings. I would handle dinner during the week. Then I reached the final line. Claire will handle laundry and ironing. Military life has already taught her discipline. The word discipline had been underlined. Brooke looked up and smiled. You're used to routines, right? I read the sentence again. The smell of fuel was still in my sleeve. My shoulders ached from travel. Behind me, Evelyn had started opening my kitchen cabinets as though she had lived there long enough to be disappointed by the arrangement. I had spent 9 months coordinating supplies for people whose lives depended on getting the right equipment at the right time. Evelyn had looked at all of that and concluded that what the army had really prepared me for was ironing her blouses. I folded the paper along its original crease and placed it on the hallway table. Make yourselves comfortable, I said, just not too comfortable. Control rarely enters a house by kicking down the door. Most of the time, it carries a suitcase and calls itself help. It begins with one assumption. One door opened without permission. One room renamed before the owner agrees. One decision described as if everyone has already voted. I was too tired to decide whether Evelyn's list was arrogance or a declaration that she planned to run my home. Before I acted, I needed answers. What had Ryan actually said? How long did they intend to stay? And did they believe I would be too polite to stop them? I carried my duffel bag upstairs and showered. When I came back down, Evelyn and Brooke were discussing where groceries should be stored. Then I noticed the living room table. Our wedding photograph had been moved to the far end, partly hidden behind a lamp. In its place, Evelyn had set a framed picture of the Dawson family, taken years before I met Ryan. She had not removed me from the room, she had simply moved me out of the center of it. That night, I lay in bed listening to unfamiliar footsteps in the hallway. Sleep did not come. At 11:43 p.m., I opened my laptop and created a new document. I typed 3 words: Operation House Rules. Evelyn wanted structure. By sunrise, she was going to learn the difference between structure and control. At 4:47 the next morning, I was already awake. I had lived by early mornings for too long to need an alarm. The house was still dark when I stepped into the kitchen, started the coffee, and pulled the small whiteboard from my office. I wrote the schedule in large, careful letters. 5 a.m., wake up. 5:20 a.m., room inspection. 5:45 a.m., cleaning assignments. 6:30 a.m., breakfast. Then I placed Evelyn's list beside it. The last thing I found was the old training whistle at the bottom of my duffel bag. It had been with me through heat, rain, and more bad mornings than I cared to count. At exactly 5, I raised it to my lips and blew. The sound tore through the house. Something dropped upstairs. Evelyn cried out. Brooke shouted that the house might be on fire. Then both of them came down the stairs in a rush, half awake and furious. Evelyn saw the board first. This is not what I meant by structure. Then we agree, I said. I let the silence sit between us for a moment. No adult should impose a schedule on another adult in her own home. Brooke said I was being petty. She called it revenge. I told her I was demonstrating the system they had brought into my house. Evelyn pulled her robe tighter and reminded me that they were guests. Guests don't arrive with rules for the people who own the home. That was the first time neither of them answered right away. I carried out the inspection, but only far enough to make the point. I asked Brooke to pick her clothes up from the floor. I asked Evelyn to carry her coffee cup to the sink. Then I assigned each of us the space we had used. Brooke cleaned the guest room. Evelyn wiped down the kitchen table. I handled the stove and breakfast. At 6:30 a.m., I served oatmeal, boiled eggs, and coffee. The food was plain, but it was not bad. I had promised breakfast at 6:30 a.m., and I meant to keep that promise. Discipline, as I understood it, applied to everyone, especially the person giving the order. Control worked differently. Control always found a reason why the rules belonged to somebody else. Discipline asks, what is my responsibility? Control asks, who can I make responsible for me? The whistle felt satisfying. I won't pretend it didn't, but satisfaction is not the same thing as a plan. After breakfast, I took the whiteboard down. One morning was enough, I said. I didn't want a barracks. I wanted my home back. Then I placed a second document on the table. The heading read, Temporary Guest Agreement. I had written it in simple language. Evelyn and Brooke could stay until Sunday evening. No guests would be invited without permission. My office would remain private. Everyone would handle their own laundry and clean the areas they used. No one would use our vehicles, bank cards, or accounts without approval. Any change to the departure date would require agreement from both Ryan and me. I had already emailed copies to all 3 of them. The timestamp mattered, not because I expected a legal battle, but because I had learned that people remember conversations very differently once consequences appear. Evelyn did not sign the paper. She did not reject it either. Instead, she said Ryan would hear about what I had done. Please send him the document, I said. I already did. For the first time, her expression shifted, just slightly. Until then, she had treated Ryan's name like a key that opened every door. Now she understood that I had spoken to the person behind the name before she could control the story. Brooke leaned back in her chair. You're really putting family on a deadline? No, I said. I'm putting a temporary stay on a deadline. Family should understand the difference. Brooke rolled her eyes. She still believed time was on her side. If she stayed long enough, she seemed certain the arrangement would become permanent, simply because removing it would feel uncomfortable. That afternoon, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was not a relative. A delivery driver stood on the porch beside 3 large boxes. Every label carried Brooke's name and my address. I checked the order date. The boxes had been purchased before Brooke ever appeared at my door. Before I tell you what was inside those boxes, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. I always find it incredible that the same story can reach people in so many different places at completely different hours. Because when I saw the shipping date, I realized the suitcases had never been temporary. They had simply been the first shipment. Brooke came onto the porch, looked at the boxes, and pointed toward the garage. "Those are mine. You can put them in the garage. You can put them wherever you're legally allowed to store them until Sunday." She waited for me to move. When I did not, she dragged the first box across the concrete. One corner tore open at the threshold. Inside, I saw a new coffee maker, 2 decorative lamps, a set of sheets, and an unassembled shoe rack. Those were not emergency supplies for someone staying a few days. They were the things people bought when setting up a room. The next morning, 2 more packages arrived. Brooke said she was getting her life organized, but when I asked where she planned to live after Sunday, she changed the subject. On the 3rd day, I found a bank envelope in the mailbox with Brooke's name and my address printed across the front. I did not open it. I photographed the envelope, recorded the date, and placed it with her mail. By the 4th day, a pickup truck backed into our driveway carrying boxes from a storage unit. Evelyn stood beside the driver, directing him toward the garage. "It's easier to keep everything in one place," she said. "This is not Brooke's permanent address." Evelyn gave me a patient smile. Nobody said permanent. That was how she spoke whenever she wanted room to deny something later. She avoided words that could be checked and preferred suggestions that remained arguable. By the 5th day, Ryan's tools were nearly hidden behind Brooke's furniture and storage bins. Ryan had spent years arranging that garage, and Brooke had covered most of it with boxes marked bedroom, kitchen, and seasonal. I put tape across the floor and marked the space her belongings could not cross. Brooke called it dramatic. People often call a boundary dramatic when they were benefiting from its absence. That afternoon, I found Evelyn standing on a chair in the dining room. She had opened the upper cabinet and taken out my grandmother's china. The set was white with a thin blue border. My grandmother had used it for birthdays and Sunday dinners. Evelyn had spread the plates across the counter. She said she planned to use them for a welcome home brunch that weekend. "You didn't ask me." "It's china, Claire. It's meant to be used by the person it belongs to." Her smile became smaller. She said I was being sensitive. Then she added that coming home after deployment could make ordinary things feel bigger than they were. It was the first time she used my return to question my judgment. My phone chimed before I could answer. A charge from a home goods store had appeared on the card Ryan and I used for household expenses. I had not bought anything. Brooke said Evelyn had given her the extra card because Ryan had always helped when she needed something. Evelyn waved the concern away. It was only for brunch supplies. Ryan wouldn't mind. I opened the banking app and froze the card. I did not raise my voice. I asked for the receipt, photographed it, and wrote down the amount. Money is often where family boundaries stop being theoretical. A person may pretend not to understand the word no, but a frozen card usually clarifies the sentence. I began a page in my notebook. When had the card been issued? Who had permission to use it? How long had Brooke been receiving help? What did Evelyn know? I did not accuse Ryan. I had facts about the charge, but not the history. Anger can move faster than evidence, and I had learned not to let it. Later, Monica from 2 houses down brought over a package delivered to her porch by mistake. She glanced past me and saw the garage. "You've got a full house, fuller than the invitation," Monica understood. She had spent years married to a service member. "Everybody celebrates the homecoming," she said. "Not many people understand that coming home is work too." She was right. People expect you to return as the version they remember. They rarely understand that you must relearn the rhythm of your own kitchen, your own bed, even your own silence. Monica did not try to fix anything. She only reminded me that my discomfort was not proof that I was unreasonable. That evening, I checked the email containing the Sunday deadline. Evelyn had opened it and never replied. Brooke had forwarded it to herself. Later, I passed the garage and heard Brooke speaking on the phone. "Don't worry," she said. "Once I've been here a little longer, she can't just throw me out." I did not know whether she had real legal advice or something she had read online. It did not matter. I had spent 5 days wondering whether they misunderstood my kindness. That sentence answered the question. They understood it perfectly. They were counting on it. I took out my phone and called the legal assistance office on base. The first thing the counselor asked was simple. "Do you have anything in writing?" "Do you have anything in writing?" the counselor asked. I told her about the temporary guest agreement, the email, the bank envelope, and the charge on our household card. She did not tell me to throw anyone out. Instead, she asked careful questions. How long had Evelyn and Brooke been staying there? Were they paying rent? Had either of them signed an agreement? Was mail being sent to the house? What exactly had Ryan approved? Did I have proof of the card purchase? She reminded me that residency rules could vary by location, and that advice from friends or websites was not the same as legal guidance. I should not threaten anyone with rules I had not confirmed. Her recommendations were practical. Keep every exchange in writing. Do not open Brooke's mail. Photograph the outside, then return it if necessary. Save receipts and doorbell footage. Change account passwords. Verify the arrangement with Ryan. Do not discard anyone's property. When the call ended, I sat at my desk and built a file. The first folder was called Original Rules, then came Guest Agreement, Financial Charges, Deliveries, Garage, Messages, Doorbell Footage. Documentation is not revenge. It is what you create when you know someone may later insist that what happened never happened. I downloaded the recordings from the doorbell camera. The camera had not seen inside the house, and I did not pretend it had. But it had recorded Evelyn and Brooke arriving with 2 large suitcases. It had recorded each delivery truck. It had captured strangers entering while I was out running. In one clip, Evelyn stood beside a driver and said, "My daughter is moving in." I saved that clip twice. Then I added my own photographs, the garage before and after Brooke's boxes, Evelyn's list, my grandmother's china across the counter, the brunch receipt, the bank envelope, the unanswered email confirming Sunday as the departure date. By the time Ryan called that evening, the file was organized. His face appeared on my laptop from a construction trailer in Alaska. A portable heater hummed behind him. He looked tired, with dust along his jacket collar and pale northern light at the window. I could have started by telling him his mother was ruining my leave. I did not. "Did you tell your mother she and Brooke could move in for several months?" Ryan stopped moving. "Move in?" I stayed quiet. I needed his full answer, not a response shaped by whatever I said next. "No," he said. "I told her Brooke could stay for 1 week while she figured out her next step." 1 week, Claire. The confirmation should have made me feel better. Instead, it settled something cold in my chest. Evelyn had not misunderstood him. She had taken a limited offer and stretched it into the arrangement she wanted. I shared my screen. I did not give Ryan a speech. I opened the files one at a time. The original list, the email with the Sunday deadline, the garage photographs, the card charge, the doorbell clips, the bank envelope, the welcome home brunch message. Ryan watched without interrupting. The heater hummed. Somewhere outside the trailer, a machine started, then faded away. When he reached the card receipt, he leaned closer. "She used our card? Brooke said your mother told her you always help." Ryan went still. His anger had never been loud. When it was real, he became quieter. He reached for his phone and said he was calling Evelyn. "Not yet." He looked at me. "If you call her now, she'll change her behavior just long enough to make this look like a misunderstanding." "What do you want me to do?" "Come home and see it before she knows you're looking." I was not asking him to help me humiliate his mother. I did not want a trap. I wanted him to see the version of Evelyn that appeared when she believed his approval was guaranteed. More than that, I needed to know what he would do after he saw it. Believing your spouse is the beginning. Protecting the marriage after you believe them is the part that costs something. Ryan might have asked me to tolerate another few weeks. He might have paid for a hotel, then continued supporting Brooke in private. He might have said his mother meant well and asked me to keep the peace. Keeping the peace sounds generous until you notice who is being asked to pay for it. Ryan did not blame me for opening the door. He said he should have been clearer. He admitted that he had allowed his mother too much access to the family card and trusted her to know the limits. Then, while we were still talking, he opened the banking app. I watched his eyes move down the screen. One recurring payment carried Brooke's name, then another, then a third. His expression changed. Claire, these didn't start after the divorce. The house rules had brought them through my front door, but the bank records were about to show us why they believed the door would never close. Ryan shared his screen. The first payment covered part of Brooke's rent. The next helped with her car. Farther down were credit card payments, storage fees, and transfers labeled temporary help. None looked enormous by itself. Together, they stretched back years. Ryan remembered a few emergencies, but not a system. One month, Brooke had been short on rent. Another month, her car needed repairs. Then came a medical bill, a deposit, and a storage unit Evelyn insisted could not wait. "Did you know all of this was still happening?" I asked. "I knew pieces," he said. "I didn't know the pieces never stopped." There had never been one dramatic lie. There had been dozens of exceptions, each presented as temporary, private, and urgent. Ryan remembered his mother's calls. "Brooke only needed help this month. Do not embarrass her by asking questions. Do not mention it to Claire. It has nothing to do with her." Family does not send invoices to family. Evelyn had not simply protected Brooke from hardship. She had protected her from the information hardship was trying to teach her. She hid how dependent Brooke had become, turned every request into a crisis, and kept Ryan from speaking directly with his sister. Ryan did not defend himself. He admitted that sending money felt easier than asking hard questions. The amount seemed small, one at a time. He had not told me because he considered them private favors. "Helping your sister wasn't the betrayal," I said. "Letting it become part of our finances without telling me was." He nodded. "I should have told you. I should have checked the totals, and I should never have let Mom decide what counted as our responsibility." We did not solve years of avoidance in one call, but for the first time, we were naming the same problem. Ryan said he could finish the project early and be home within a few days. I asked him not to call Evelyn, warn Brooke, or send an angry message. Before leaving Alaska, he would review the accounts, freeze the extra card, reserve hotel rooms, and arrange a moving service for the following morning. The plan was not about humiliation. I wanted Evelyn to behave normally, without changing long enough to make everything look like a misunderstanding. The next morning, I found her measuring the space between the dining table and the window. My grandmother's china covered the sideboard. "I'm hosting a small welcome home brunch for you on Saturday," she said. "You invited people into my house without asking me?" Evelyn kept adjusting the plates. "They're excited to meet you. You need to get used to being around people again." It sounded caring. It was not. She was suggesting that I needed help returning to normal, and that she had the right to define normal for me. When I asked who was coming, she listed women from church, 2 book club members, a real estate agent, and a friend who had asked Brooke about housing. The brunch looked less like a welcome home gesture and more like an announcement that Brooke had found a permanent place. I could have canceled it. Part of me wanted to put the china away and lock the door. That would have protected my privacy. It also would have allowed Evelyn to tell Ryan that I had overreacted. The guests could witness how she described the house. Ryan needed to see the full system, not a version prepared for him. "Go ahead," I said. "Have your brunch." Evelyn smiled as though she had won. She heard permission. What I had actually given her was room to finish building the case against herself. Later, Monica saw flowers and folding chairs being carried inside. She asked whether I was sure. "No," I said, "but I'm sure I want Ryan to see what happens when his mother believes nobody can stop her." Monica promised to watch the street. She did not offer to attend, and I was grateful. That night, Ryan sent a short message. Flight changed. I'll be there Saturday. I asked what time. He did not answer. He was already between connections. The next morning, Evelyn began moving furniture before sunrise. China clicked against china. Silverware rang against glass. The doorbell started soon after. I wore simple clothes, no uniform, no medals. I did not need a symbol of authority to prove I belonged in my own home. From the kitchen, I heard Evelyn greeting guests like a hostess. "This is my son's house. I've been keeping everything together while Claire readjusts." My phone vibrated. Landed. 6 cars lined the curb, but Ryan's rental was not among them. Then a woman stepped into the kitchen and smiled at me. "You must be so grateful to have Evelyn here taking care of you." I set my tea down. That was the moment I knew Evelyn had finally said the wrong thing in front of exactly the right audience. "You must be so grateful to have Evelyn here, taking care of you." I set my tea on the counter. My grandmother's china covered the table. The flowers beside it had been purchased with our household card. Brooke stood near the food as though she belonged there. Across the room, Evelyn waited for me to confirm the story she had already told. Actually, Evelyn and Brooke were invited for 1 week. They've been here nearly 3. The change in the room was small, but I felt it. One woman stopped stirring her tea. Another looked toward Evelyn. Brooke lowered the serving tongs hard enough to strike the tray. Evelyn kept smiling. She told the women I was exhausted and having trouble keeping track of time. Then she said I had been under enormous pressure overseas and that she and Brooke were trying to give me structure until Ryan came home. Brooke added that I had awakened them with an army whistle at 5 in the morning and tried to inspect their rooms. The way she told it made one morning sound like evidence of a breakdown. A few faces changed. Not into anger, into something worse. Pity. There is a particular kind of cruelty in using someone's service as evidence that they cannot be trusted. People say they support veterans, but some are quick to turn deployment into a diagnosis the moment a veteran says no. I did not deny that coming home required adjustment. None of that made me confused. "Did you tell them why I used the whistle?" Evelyn said this was not the place to discuss private family matters. "You made it the place when you discussed my mental state in my home." The room went still. I did not need every woman there to understand me. But I would not let a lie stand simply because correcting it made people uncomfortable. "I'm adjusting to being home," I said. "I am not confused about who owns it." Evelyn changed direction. She listed what she claimed to have done. She said I had not prepared a proper dinner since returning. She said the living room felt cold. She reminded everyone that Brooke had gone through a divorce and needed a safe place. What she left out mattered more. The written rules, the card, Brooke's mail, the packages ordered before they arrived, the Sunday deadline. The most effective manipulation rarely depends on a complete lie. It depends on a carefully edited truth. I opened the kitchen drawer and removed Evelyn's folded paper. I did not show the women my entire file. I gave them 3 facts. They were invited for 1 week. They arrived with rules for me. And they used our household card without my permission. One guest looked at Evelyn. "You gave Claire rules?" Brooke said they were only suggestions. I placed the paper on the counter. Suggestions usually don't assign somebody else your laundry. 2 women leaned closer to read it. Another set her cup down. Brooke saw the room shifting away from her, and her voice sharpened. She said the paper did not matter. Mail was already coming to her at the house, and I could not throw her out simply because I was in a mood. "Did you change your mailing address before you arrived?" Brooke looked toward Evelyn instead of answering. That was answer enough. Evelyn stepped between us and repeated that Ryan had said Brooke could stay as long as necessary. I told her Ryan had said 1 week. She claimed that was not how he had explained it. "Then we can ask him." Her smile turned cold. She said Ryan was working and should not be dragged into every emotional reaction I had. Then she said something that removed every polite excuse. If living with family was too much for me, perhaps I should spend the rest of my leave in temporary lodging on base. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood her. I had not. Evelyn was suggesting that I leave my own home so Brooke could remain in it. One woman spoke softly. Evelyn, that doesn't sound reasonable. But Evelyn had gone too far to step back. She turned toward me. This is Ryan's house. Someone had to take charge. A man's voice came from the entryway. Take charge of whose house, Mom? Silence moved through the room. I turned. Ryan stood inside the front door with a travel bag over one shoulder. Cold air still clung to his jacket. His eyes moved from the rule sheet to my grandmother's china to the guests. Evelyn's face lost its color. Brooke stepped away from the food. Ryan looked at his mother. I heard you tell my wife to leave her own home. He set his bag down, walked to the counter, and picked up the list. Mom, who gave you permission to hand Claire rules in a home she owns? Evelyn opened her mouth. Nothing came out. If you are still listening, please leave a comment below and tell me your level of satisfaction with the story so far. It lets me know there are still people walking beside me through this entire journey. Your presence is the greatest encouragement I have to keep telling the final part. Evelyn finally found her voice. I was trying to help Claire readjust. Ryan looked down at the paper in his hand. By assigning her your laundry, Evelyn said the list had been meant to create a routine. Ryan did not raise his voice. She has a routine, he said. She commands people for a living. He was not using my rank to make me more important than anyone else. He was pointing out how absurd it was to treat me like a confused child who needed to be managed. Evelyn drew herself up and reminded him that the house was still his. Ryan looked at her for a long moment. It is our house. Claire's name is on the deed, the mortgage, the insurance, and every repair bill we've paid. Then he turned slightly so the women in the room could hear him clearly. My mother and sister were invited for 1 week, nothing more. That sentence changed the balance in the room. Until then, Evelyn had been speaking through Ryan's authority. She had used his name like a stamp of approval. Now the person she had been quoting was standing there, taking that approval back. Evelyn said she had only wanted to help. Ryan placed the list on the counter. Help requires consent. Control doesn't. Nobody moved. That sentence mattered because it separated intention from impact. Evelyn had hidden behind what she meant for years. Ryan was finally holding her accountable for what she did. A person can honestly believe they mean well and still cause harm. Good intentions do not erase a boundary after someone has said no. The real questions are simpler. Did you have the right to decide? Did the other person agree? And did you keep going after they objected? Evelyn's voice rose. She asked whether this was how Ryan spoke to her after everything she had done for him. He took a breath before answering. You raised me. I love you for that. It did not give you permanent authority over my marriage. She said he was choosing me over his own mother. I'm not choosing Claire over you. Claire is my wife. I'm choosing to protect the boundary you crossed. There was pain in his voice. He was not enjoying this. Setting a boundary with someone you love does not always feel strong. Sometimes it feels like grief. You are not only ending a behavior, you are letting go of the hope that the person would stop without being forced. Ryan told Evelyn he had seen the original rules, the email with the departure date, the garage, the card receipt, the doorbell footage, Brooke's mail, and the transfers that had continued for years. Brooke cut in and said those payments had nothing to do with me. Ryan looked at her. Money leaving our household account has everything to do with Claire. Brooke went quiet. For years, she had treated Ryan's income as if it belonged to a separate version of him. A brother with no mortgage, no wife, and no life affected by what he gave away. That version no longer existed. Ryan explained what would happen next. He had reserved 2 hotel rooms for 3 nights. A moving service would arrive the following morning. Brooke's boxes would go back to a storage unit in her own name. Every extra card had been frozen. No new payment would be made until he reviewed the full situation with her later. Evelyn turned toward me and said I had planned all of this to embarrass them. I did not answer. Ryan did. Claire gave you a private deadline. You chose a public audience. One of Evelyn's friends approached me before leaving. She apologized for accepting the story she had been told. "You were told a version designed to be believed," I said. I did not ask her to defend me. I did not need the room to vote. The guests left. Cups were placed beside the sink. Chairs scraped across the floor. The front door opened and closed until only the four of us remained. Evelyn had lost control of the story. The people she invited as an audience had become witnesses instead. Brooke tried one last argument. She said she received mail there, and we could not make her leave that night. Ryan told her he had spoken with someone before coming home. "We are handling this properly. The hotel is voluntary accommodation, and the written process starts today." He did not debate laws he had not confirmed. He did not threaten her. He simply removed the uncertainty she had been using as leverage. Brooke looked less worried about leaving the house than about losing access to the money behind it. After the final guest drove away, Evelyn folded her arms. "I'm not packing." Ryan looked at her. "Then I'll pack for you." He turned and walked upstairs. I stayed beside the kitchen counter. That was not my fight to finish. It was the line Ryan should have drawn years earlier, and this time I was going to let him draw it himself. Ryan went upstairs and opened Evelyn's suitcase. He did not throw anything inside. He folded each blouse, placed her toiletries in a separate bag, and tucked her medication into the front pocket where she could reach it. Every movement was slow and careful. That mattered. This was not recklessness. This was a decision. Evelyn stood at the bottom of the stairs, crying hard enough to make each breath uneven. "Are you satisfied now?" I looked at her, but I did not move closer. "This is between you and your son." She said I had planned all of it. The whistle, the paperwork, the brunch, Ryan's return. "I documented what happened," I said. "You planned the brunch." Her face tightened. She wanted anger from me. One cruel sentence, one smile, one moment of triumph. Anything she could carry away and use later as proof that I had always been the real problem. I gave her nothing. Sometimes dignity is not the perfect sentence. Sometimes it is refusing to provide the sentence someone plans to use against you. In the garage, Brooke sat on a storage bin with her phone face down beside her. It was the first time I had seen her without it in her hand. Ryan came down carrying one of Evelyn's bags, then stopped when Brooke asked where she was supposed to go after the hotel. "You're going to make a plan," he said. Brooke reminded him that she had just gone through a divorce. Ryan told her the divorce explained why she needed support. It did not explain why she had redirected her mail, used our card, and lied about how long she intended to stay. He offered help with limits, 3 nights at the hotel, an appointment with a financial counselor, a list of apartments within her price range. He would not pay her rent directly. He would not reopen the card. Brooke stared at him as if the limits were the betrayal. For years, support had meant somebody else removing the consequence. Now it meant giving her tools and leaving the decision in her hands. By late afternoon, the 2 suitcases stood beside the front door again. They were in the same place where they had appeared less than 3 weeks earlier. When they arrived, they represented a decision made without me. When they left, they represented a boundary finally restored. Evelyn stood beside them with her coat over one arm. "If I leave this house, don't expect things to go back to normal." Ryan looked tired, but his voice stayed steady. "Normal is what created this. I'm not asking for it back." That was when I understood his change was real. He was not trying to survive one argument and return to the old arrangement. He was willing to question the arrangement itself. The moving service had taken most of Brooke's boxes back to storage. Ryan carried the suitcases to Evelyn's car. No neighbors gathered to watch. Monica stood in her yard with a watering can and gave me a small nod. Evelyn got into the driver's seat without looking at me. Brooke paused before closing the passenger door and looked back at the house. For 1 second, she seemed less angry than frightened. Then the door shut. The car pulled away. Ryan and I stood on the porch and listened until the engine disappeared beyond the corner. Relief arrived quietly. It did not feel like victory. It felt like finally being able to unclench a muscle I had forgotten I was holding. We did not hug right away. There was still too much left to say. Inside, the house looked disturbed but familiar. A chair sat out of place. One of my grandmother's plates remained beside the sink. A strip of tape still marked the garage floor. I asked Ryan about the money. He told me he had been helping Brooke long before the divorce. Each payment seemed small at the time. Evelyn presented every request as the final emergency. He stayed quiet because he did not want to seem selfish and because avoiding the argument felt easier than admitting the pattern. You protected their comfort with information that belonged to our marriage. He lowered his eyes. You're right. He did not ask me to forgive him. He did not say the scene at the brunch should make everything even. Financial independence is not only about earning your own money. It is also about knowing who has access to the life your money is building. Ryan and I both worked. We both contributed, but without honesty, shared income could still be used in ways that left one partner carrying consequences they never agreed to. Helping family was not wrong. Hiding the cost was. The next morning, the house was quiet. My phone showed 7 missed calls and 3 voice messages from Evelyn. In the first message, she did not apologize. You humiliated me in front of my friends. I turned off the screen. She still believed the worst thing that had happened was being seen. Evelyn's messages changed from day to day. The first day, she was angry. She said Ryan had embarrassed her and allowed me to turn a family disagreement into a public spectacle. The second day, she cried. She said she had nowhere to go, even though the hotel was paid for and her own house was still available. The third day, she reminded Ryan of every sacrifice she had made while raising him. The fourth day, she said I was isolating him from his family. By the 5th day, the relatives started calling. Ryan sent one message. We will not discuss this through relatives. We need 30 days without contact. After that, we can speak if the conversation begins with accountability rather than blame. Then he stopped answering. One of his cousins texted me that family problems should stay private. They had stayed private for years. Privacy had not healed them. It had only protected the pattern. I did not send that. Instead, I wrote, Ryan and I are handling it together. I won't discuss private details through third parties. That was all. I stopped treating every misunderstanding as an emergency I was required to correct. For most of my life, I believed that if someone misunderstood me, I needed to explain more clearly. What I had not understood was that some people do not misunderstand because the facts are confusing. They misunderstand because the wrong version is more useful to them. Trying to persuade every relative would have made me a prisoner of their opinions, so I let the silence stand. Ryan spent the next week organizing every payment he had made for Brooke. He put the rent, car expenses, storage fees, credit card payments, and transfers into one document. He did not send it to shame her. He sent it because neither of them had ever looked at the full picture. Then he offered 3 kinds of help. He would pay once for a meeting with a financial counselor. He would help her revise her resume and search for work. He would consider lending her the deposit for an apartment with a written repayment schedule. He would not make another car payment. He would not pay her credit card. He would not transfer cash without a clear purpose. The household card would remain closed. Brooke called him furious. She said he was punishing her because of me. Ryan listened until she finished. Claire didn't create these numbers, he said. We did. That was the first time he included himself without using responsibility as an excuse to continue the same behavior. The changes did not happen gracefully. Brooke sold furniture she did not need. She canceled subscriptions she had forgotten she was paying for. She accepted an administrative job at a medical clinic, even though she told Ryan it was beneath what she had imagined for herself. She rented a smaller apartment than the one she wanted. For the first time, she tracked her car payment, utilities, groceries, and credit card balance herself. A few weeks later, she sent Ryan a small repayment. The amount was not important. The fact that it came from her was. People do not always begin changing because they understand. Sometimes they begin because the old arrangement has finally stopped working. Ryan and I started sitting down once a week with our accounts open between us. We reviewed the household balance. We listed help given to relatives. We agreed on an amount that required both of us to say yes. We changed passwords, removed old access, and set alerts for larger transactions. None of it felt romantic. It felt necessary. One night, Ryan closed the laptop and said, "I thought avoiding conflict kept the family together." "It kept the conflict alive," I said. "It just moved the cost onto us." He was learning that discomfort was not always a sign that something had gone wrong. Sometimes discomfort was the price of doing something right. When my leave ended, I returned to my unit. At work, people trusted me with decisions. They gave me information, expected an answer, and understood that a calm voice could still mean no. The contrast stayed with me. I had never struggled to set boundaries in uniform. I struggled at home because home was where I feared that firmness would be mistaken for coldness. Many capable people enforce boundaries everywhere except at home. Home is where we are most afraid that saying no will cost us love. Over time, the calls stopped. Evelyn no longer had access to the house. She could not move money through Ryan. She could not use him as a messenger between Brooke and the consequences of her choices. Nearly 2 months later, my phone rang one evening. Evelyn's name appeared on the screen. I was ready to let it go to voicemail. Ryan looked at me. "Only answer if you're ready." I picked up. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Evelyn said, in a voice smaller than I had ever heard from her, "I owe you an apology." "I owe you an apology." I did not answer right away. In the past, I would have filled the silence for her. I would have said it was fine, or told her not to worry, or found some gentle way to make the moment easier. This time, I let her carry it. Evelyn took a breath. "I thought being Ryan's mother gave me a permanent vote in his marriage. It didn't." Her voice was steady, but small. She admitted that Ryan had only offered 1 week. She had stretched that into something larger because she assumed nobody would stop her. She knew Brooke planned to use our address. She knew the deliveries had started before they arrived. Then she said something I had not expected. She had believed I would be too tired to push back. She said that after deployment, she thought I would want somebody else making decisions for me. When I resisted, she used that same assumption against me. She suggested to her friends that I was unstable because it made my objections easier to dismiss. The brunch had not only been a welcome home event, it had been a performance. If enough people saw Evelyn acting like the woman holding the family together, then Brooke's presence in my house might begin to look normal. Accepted. Almost official. Hearing her admit that hurt in a different way. Anger had been easier. Anger gave me something solid to push against. Remorse asked me to stay still long enough to decide whether the person speaking had truly changed or had simply learned better words. Evelyn did not say, "I'm sorry if you felt hurt." She did not add the word "but." Instead, she named what she had done. "I was wrong to enter your home as if your consent was optional." She paused. "I was wrong to discuss your mental state with strangers." Another pause. "And I was wrong to use Ryan's money and his name as authority." Specific apologies are harder than vague ones. A vague apology asks the injured person to finish the work. It leaves room for everyone to pretend the harm was only a misunderstanding. A specific apology closes that room. "Thank you for saying that," I told her. "It matters." I looked at Ryan. He did not signal for me to say more. He did not ask me to make the moment easier for his mother. Trust will take longer. Evelyn asked if I thought I could ever forgive her. Forgiveness is not the same as access. She became quiet again. An apology can open a door. It does not decide how far the door opens. Evelyn had the right to apologize. I had the right to need time. Forgiving her would not automatically return her key, her influence over our money, or her ability to enter my home without asking. We ended the call without making plans. Brooke did not contact me that night. She did not call the next week either. Instead, she kept working. She sent Ryan a second repayment. She mailed back the frozen card. Then she moved the rest of her mail away from our address and sent him the confirmation. Only after those things were done did she text me. "I used your house like a solution instead of treating it like your home. I'm sorry," I read the message twice. "Thank you," I wrote. "Keep building your own place." I meant the apartment. I also meant the life. Ryan met Evelyn alone at a coffee shop. He did not ask me to sit beside him or help explain the rules. He told her she could not come to the house without an invitation. She would not use the spare key. She would not ask for money on Brooke's behalf. She would not discuss our marriage with relatives, and she would never again use my mental health as a weapon in an argument. Evelyn agreed. Agreement did not restore access. Several months passed before I suggested a short Sunday dinner. No outside guests, no overnight stay, no financial discussions at the table. Everyone would arrive on time and leave after the meal. Ryan asked whether I was sure. "No," I said. But being unsure is different from being unprepared. When the doorbell rang that Sunday, I looked through the glass. Evelyn stood on the porch holding a small bunch of flowers. Brooke carried a covered dish. There were no suitcases. Neither woman reached for the handle. They waited. That small pause meant more to me than the flowers or the food. The first time they came, they had treated my open door like an obligation. Now they understood it was a choice. I opened the door. Evelyn did not step forward. "May we come in?" I looked at her for a moment, then moved aside. Yes. The first time Evelyn entered my home, she brought a list of rules. The second time, she brought something far more difficult for her: respect. Dinner was not perfect. That was probably why it felt honest. Evelyn almost called the living room Ryan's living room, then stopped and corrected herself. "Your living room," she said. Brooke stood near the entryway, with her purse still over one shoulder, and asked where she should put it. Ryan glanced at me before answering, careful not to take over a decision that belonged to us. My office door stayed closed. Nobody mentioned it. Evelyn asked, before using the vase on the dining table. Brooke had brought dessert from a bakery near her apartment, and made a point of saying she had paid for it herself. After dinner, they carried their own plates into the kitchen. Brooke wiped the table without being asked. No one handed me a list. No one expected me to serve them. The changes were small enough that another person might not have noticed. I noticed everyone. Brooke told us the clinic job was not what she had imagined. The work could be repetitive, and some days she came home tired. Then she said it was the first job that made her feel like her life belonged to her. That feeling is expensive at first, I told her. Then it becomes freedom. She nodded. She did not ask Ryan to fix anything. She did not bring up a bill that required somebody else's money. Evelyn admitted she had been so used to being needed that she never asked whether her help kept Brooke from standing on her own. Some parents confuse being needed with being loved. When their children become independent, they do not feel proud. They feel replaced. I understood more about Evelyn then. Understanding did not erase responsibility. Understanding why someone crossed a boundary does not require reopening the boundary. After dessert, I opened the kitchen drawer. The old list was still there. The paper had softened along the original folds. The line about laundry and ironing remained near the bottom. The word discipline was still underlined. A small coffee stain marked one corner. I placed the paper on the table. Evelyn looked down at it. I was ashamed of that paper before I was willing to admit I was ashamed of myself. I did not bring it out to embarrass her. I brought it out because it had once represented the rules she believed she could place over my life. I tore it in half. Then I tore it again. One small piece stayed between my fingers. It carried the underlined word discipline. "There is only one rule in this house," I said. Everyone waited. Respect. Everything else follows from that. Respect meant asking before making decisions for someone else. It meant shared money required shared agreement. It meant an apology had to be followed by different behavior. And it meant family could not use blood as a reason to erase a boundary. Evelyn nodded. Brooke looked down at her hands. Ryan reached for mine under the table. Later, Evelyn and Brooke thanked us for dinner. They walked to the car without drama, and the door closed gently behind them. The house settled into silence. It was almost 9. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the wall where the whiteboard had hung that first morning. Ryan noticed the small piece of paper in my hand. Why keep that part? Because she thought discipline meant obedience. What did it mean to you? I looked at the underlined word, knowing when not to react and knowing when silence has done enough. Evelyn had mistaken my silence for surrender. She thought that because I did not shout, I would not act. What she never understood was that silence had kept people alive in places she had never seen. It was not emptiness. It was where I observed, gathered facts, and decided what came next. But silence is only strength when it eventually protects something. Otherwise, it becomes permission. I did not need Evelyn to confirm my value. I did not need Ryan to defend me in public before I knew I deserved respect. I did not need every guest at that brunch to understand. My worth had never depended on their agreement. Family is not proved by who demands access to your life. It is proved by who learns how to enter it with respect. So tell me honestly, how satisfied were you with the way I handled Evelyn and Brooke? Should I have asked them to leave the first night, or was waiting for the truth to reveal itself the right decision? Rate the ending from 1 to 10 in the comments, and tell me what you would have done if someone handed you a list of rules in your own home. I still wake up before 5 some mornings, but now, the only schedule in that house is the one Ryan and I choose together. What do you think about her decision? Would you have handled the situation differently if you were in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this story gave you something to think about, please leave a like, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the stories still to come. I'll see you in the next story. This is Honor Family Radio, where we use stories to walk through the years together, rediscover peace, and find the strength within ourselves.